All right, and now we're live. Good afternoon, Irene. Thank you for joining me here today. Excited to have you on the podcast.
Good afternoon, Gary. I'm excited to be here.
Well, and it is interesting that we do this podcast, and I always look forward to the variety of views we get from our guests, and try to have a diverse group of people from backgrounds and sort of their career paths, etc. And I feel like every time I do this, I learn a lot. So Irene, I want to start with some of the basics. Tell us a little bit about you, sort of you growing up and that upbringing and sort of the path that led you to where we are today.
We're starting early. Okay.
I know
I can go back. That's fine.
So we have time.
I think the interesting thing is, growing up, I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go. I knew that I was really, really curious. And I knew that I loved working with people. So those were the two elements that were at play. And so when the time came to pick majors, I was really debating whether I go down the tech route or I go down, I really enjoyed business. I enjoyed economics. So my second option was going down the economics route. So I couldn't make a decision. So I decided to go down both. And so I ended up getting a degree both in computer science and in economics. And then to top it all off, an MBA after. And so I decided to follow across all the areas that I was interested in. And I think where I landed was really the intersection of three practices: technology, business operations, and then later in my career, cybersecurity. And I find those three, when they're brought together, they're quite powerful. And so I've made a career for myself out of taking organizations through large-scale digital transformations. And that has been a very interesting path for me where I could actually make a significant impact on organizations. Now, when I reflect on my path, I think where it all started with is that I'm a builder at heart. I really get a lot of gratification out of seeing the results of my work. And so the mix of tech and business really allowed me to take change and transform and get measurable results. And, now in retrospect, now that I've had a chance to reflect on that, I realize I do that in other parts of my life as well. Like, for instance, I love cooking because you get to put your creativity, you get to do something, and then you get to see the results of your work right away when people eat the food you make. So it's kind of a consistent theme.
And I can appreciate the exciting parts of seeing things come together when you see the components, Irene, and then sort of the choreography of it all coming together and playing out in the way you want it to be. And Irene, just a bit more sort of at the individual level. Did you grow up in the GTA? Sort of, what were the early years of Irene's life like?
So I'm actually originally not from Canada. I was born in Azerbaijan.
Okay.
And I've moved to Canada, now 24 years ago. So a big part of definitely my adulthood and later part of growing up, I would say, was spent in Canada. It was a great experience. It was great to explore different cultures. It was great to embrace how multicultural Toronto is. And so gave me an opportunity to learn a lot about people from all over the world, myself being one of them, and really embrace the multiculturalism of Canada.
And for the people in the audience that would know me, you know that when I first met Irene, I said, do I say Irene? Do I say Irene? It's like asking all the proper ways to say the name as you think from a cultural perspective. And then in terms of the cultural background, etc. And then we also, turns out, moved to Canada at the same time. I also moved to Canada 24 years ago. So that's like, oh, look at the parallels. Wow. Although I was from Albania, but still a lot of similarities from the Eastern Bloc back at the time.
Absolutely.
And Irene, I'm going to go back to a little bit of sort of the path from that front. So following university, and I think of a lot of women, that listeners, etc., what were some of the career steps that you had to sort of prove to show through and to being something as leading as edges like AI and then cybersecurity, et cetera. So how did you navigate the world that is so new and consistently evolving?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that elements of it change probably every week or every day.
100%.
I think the overarching theme is I love learning. And I think I even mentioned that in my introduction. I just love learning new things. I will say it drives my husband a little bit crazy. He calls me a forever student, and at any point in time, he says I'm studying something, and the bank account reflects that. But I enjoy it, and that's what keeps me happy. And so, being in a space that is constantly evolving, constantly changing, where you get to learn something new every day, just for me, it's the right fit. It reflects well who I am, and it feeds something inside me. So that is a very, very important part. I never stop learning, and then the areas that are evolving that are more of interest, I just naturally, for me, gravitated towards them. So I can't say that I was a 12-year-old girl reflecting and saying, I'm going to be an AI expert one day, because I did not know what AI was. But I will say I was always asking questions. I was always curious. And I started on reporting and the database side, and then I moved to architecture, and then I moved to overall program delivery, and then I moved to organizational transformations, and I shifted in a number of different industries, and I've seen some of the similarities and the cross-pollination that can be brought across. And AI is one theme that can just so very quickly speed up the entire transformation process, and get us to an answer that is better quality and in a shorter amount of time. And that's what I really enjoy about AI.
And Irene, it's certainly a space that, especially when you think of computer programming, et cetera, to a large extent had been male dominated, and just you could say that to this day still is. What advice do you have, especially for women going into this space, in terms of navigating it and being encouraged that, hey, this is actually like, you don't have to feel like you don't belong and it can be done, et cetera?
I think when it comes to a role or a job description, the two genders look at those quite differently. What research has showed that when a man reviews a job description and assesses their fit, if they can meet about 30% of the criteria, they will apply. And they believe that they will be a good fit for that role. For women, it's a very different story. A woman will, with the same qualifications, will review the same job description. And if she fulfills less than 80% on that list, she will not apply. And that's something that we as women need to work on. I think we have to build up the confidence to apply for these roles. We have to get into the mindset that we're capable and we can deliver. And you don't have to have all the answers right out of the gate. It's okay if you don't have some of the answers. There's no expectation that you have the answer to every question, but you will learn and you will develop and you will succeed.
No, and I think that's really good advice. And I think it's good advice broadly, the in terms of building some self-confidence. And we've seen this come up time after time in the podcast about imposter syndrome and sort of approaching new things. But certainly more emphasized for women, because the often they're approaching roles, to your point, with a level of timidness that sometimes men may not as much. Very interesting, but I think you can't argue with the research when you see the data points. So I want to pivot to something, Erin, just in terms of the learning of where things stand in the market, et cetera, and a bit of what you've seen. And some of this, we even chatted in a webinar we did together not too long ago. So and I'll give you a bit more context in terms of what I'm thinking. So I'll split this up into two pieces. One is, what should organizations consider before they sort of go into certain AI initiatives and technology initiatives a bit more often? But then I want to talk a little bit about how can they make sure they are successful at it. This is one of the things that I thought had really good insights on, and was worth bringing up for the purpose of the podcast?
Very, very good question. So there are a number of different things that organizations should look at as they go down the AI journey. Many of them are not technical. So I would say the first consideration is, have you figured out what your strategy is overall with AI? And once you have figured out what that strategy is, do you have alignment from leadership? AI is not something that you can do effectively at just one layer of the organization. You need full top-down commitment to get alignment and to actually have a successful AI rollout. It could be alignment top-down from the whole organization, or it could be top-down from a business unit perspective, but you have to have the leadership bought it. The second piece, and it's really important, it's having the right team. And often people in technology think, well, the right team, I'll have my developers, I'll have my architects, I'll have my QA. Absolutely, you need to have them. But the right team is a broader concept. You need to have your business unit, individuals from the business unit for whom you're doing this implementation in the team. You need to have your risk colleagues in the team. You need to have your cybersecurity colleagues in the team, et cetera, et cetera. It's really a cross-functional team that results in a successful AI implementation. You will run into a lot of problems, a lot of unexpected things. And if you don't have the right cross-functional team, it will take you a really long time to work through these. So team is key. The other piece to think through is process in how you implement technology, implement projects, but also your decision-making process. For instance, you might have decided to go down a particular path with implementing a technology. It sounds great. This might have happened to me. We had a decision. We were going down a particular path. Everybody signed off. It sounded great. Everybody was happy. The next day, there was a big announcement from Microsoft. And guess what? My strategy was no longer the correct one. And so I had to eat some humble pie, come back the next day and say, I know we agreed on this, and I know this was my strategy, but with the new information that came out, we actually have to pivot, and there is a better way of doing it. So you need to have agility, not just in your delivery process, but also in your decision-making process. Some of the other pieces to consider is your data strategy, because you can have the best technology, the best tool, but if you don't have the right data enabling it, what you end up with is garbage in, garbage out. Or it just won't work. So you need to have your data ready. You need to have your data secure. You need to have the right data quality and the right data availability. The next piece I think is fairly self-explanatory. You need to have the right tech. Just the desire to do creative things, the desire to be innovative is not enough. You actually need to make sure you have the right technology stack, that you have dealt with your technology debt, or you have found a way to stand up this technology separately. So always think through what's your tech architecture and what's your tech roadmap. And then the last piece is very, very important, and that's always having a risk lens. So how does this impact the risk profile of your project, of your organization? And on the opposite side of it, what governance are you putting in place to make sure that you keep the organization secure and those risks managed?
All really good point, Irene. Just a couple of follow-up questions for you on those, because I think there's a lot of important takeaways for people to unpack. And I'll start first with agility. You know how you said approach things with agility, because sometimes you get, especially in today's world where you have announcements by the day that seem to incrementally move the needle a fair bit. So how do you keep your team agile and sort of mentality in such a way that they can think like, okay, I know I planned for this, but now I actually have to pivot differently? Like, are there any strategies you've employed that's worked well?
Yeah, so I think the way I would answer that, it made me reflect on something that I heard yesterday at a Microsoft conference. And what Microsoft has shared is that 46% of adults today use AI at work. That is a huge number.
For sure.
Not only is it impressive, but what it also tells us is that we have to change whether we like it or not. because the change is already here. So for our people, what we have to do is ensure that we take them on the journey with the tech. The worst thing that can possibly happen is that technology will move forward and our people will be left behind. There's a lot of fear and anxiety about whether jobs are going to go away with Gen AI. I think the reality that we can all align on is that in the immediate future, it's not going to be Gen AI that replaces people, but it's people who are highly efficient and effective with Gen AI that will replace those that are not. And so the best help and the best service we can do for our staff and our people is to take them on the journey with us and help them transform their skill sets, but also help them think differently. So instead of going to work and doing the same thing and then getting a memo, did you use Gen AI today? Them actually starting to think differently about every single task that they do during the day. And so we strongly believe in guiding our people down a path, helping them transform, helping them think differently. We have launched various programs for our staff to help them with the transformation. We want every single person in the organization to be human-led. We want to be human-led, tech-powered, and so we need to have every person tech-powered to live into that. So massive investments in change management, in L&D, at all levels of the organization, from the CEO to the directors, to the associates. Everybody is getting trained, and we're spending time with every.
Well, and that training then also helps with agility because it's not a foreign concept to everyone else in terms of understanding basics, at least. So, Irene, I will pivot to another question around this, and it is just around implementation. And we talked about training, but in terms of making sure there's product stickiness, and obviously you do a fair bit of due diligence to make sure you choose the right tools after the business case has been made. What have been the most successful strategies, other than sort of that training piece, to make sure that there's product stickiness about anything you introduce?
I think one of the challenges that a lot of technologists make is they think if we create the best tech solution with the best features and we give that to the business, it will be a huge win. And it sounds really great, but when it comes down to reality, the strategy always runs into challenges because you have delivered it. It probably has taken you a long time to build it. But then maybe the business had different expectations. Maybe their requirements are a bit different. In the end of the day, they're probably not getting what they thought they were getting. And even though you might perceive that that was the best technology, that might not be how it's perceived by your business. And the value comes in not at the point of the rollout of your tech, but at the point of adoption. And so if you don't get that adoption, you have just missed the boat. So the way to ensure that you avoid this unpleasant experience is right from day one, from the beginning, have the business unit, have the users, have the stakeholders embedded in the project from day one. They're the ones sitting at the table with you, defining what the solution is, defining the requirements, defining the user experience. They're then evolving to be the champions for the solution within the business. They're the ones also that are testing it out, making sure that it truly provides the value that is expected, that it provides the experience that is expected. They're going to turn into not just your champions, but your SMEs and the lines that push forward the solution, explain the value of it in language that is non-tech speak, in language that is really business speak, that is relevant to their colleagues. And they're going to be the ones that answer a lot of the questions about the tool or questions that their colleagues will have. So by doing that, you're embedding the answer to all your problems all the way in the beginning. And so you're solving these problems before they arise. You make sure that you involve the business. You make sure that you deliver what is truly relevant. And you make sure that you build out champions throughout the process. And then, of course, that has to be followed by the right change management and L&D, et cetera. But now you have your champions, your business champions that help you through building the right change management programs, building the right training, and and answering questions or bringing up any gaps that you might have overlooked.
Irene, just statistically, or if you could give some sense of what would be appropriate numbers, what should, let's say I'm implementing a technology within the organization. What level would you say is sort of considered a win, or what should be considered a win? What level of adoption, if you were to give ranges?
I think that's a tough question to answer. It really depends on the nature of the technology. I will tell you from a Gen AI perspective, we want everyone using Gen AI. So here, the bar is really high. With some solutions that are more niche solutions, 20% adoption might be good adoption. So it all depends on the nature of what the technology is. I would focus on, as you're embarking down a certain path, what does your business case look like? What is the ROI that you have committed to? And if you meet that requirement, then you've done well.
Right. Then the rest is less relevant. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, and also that tells people, so any of our listeners, that the answer won't always be consistent, that what may be a good sort of percentage in a particular product may be very different. And Irene, we talked a bit about sort of understanding the expectations and making sure you get ahead of that at the beginning. What can the technology providers themselves, again, we'll have by definition listeners that are on the technology side, what should they do to make your life easier? Are there data points? Are there practices they can employ that would make it easier for you if their solution were to be picked?
I think the best thing that technology providers can do is de-risk the proposition for the CIO. Being a CIO is a fairly tough job. You have a lot of things flying at you from different directions. And most CIOs, they're looking for a way to de-risk their position. As a technology vendor, you can really help on that front. You can help with how the implementation is structured. You can help with how the risk around it is managed. You can help with how change management and what a role you play in the change management journey, what role you play in the L&D journey. So if you look at all the steps of the SDLC and where the accountabilities fall, vendors who are brave enough to put up their hand and say, we have done this before, we have been through this journey before, we understand the risks, we're willing to take on more accountability, will fundamentally do better than those that really try to limit their exposure. So CIOs will definitely lean towards vendors who want to be partners, truly be long-term partners in a journey together.
Well, I think that's very important advice, Irene, because to your point, technology providers will see this play out with a variety of their client base. So if they can bring those learnings to help you with de-risking and make life easier for you, then it's a win for everybody because they are making sure there's stickiness within the organization. And for the CIOs, well, there's one less thing that they have to be resource heavy on because this particular provider is doing a lot of. I'll have to do a summary post of this and put that as a key takeaway for any technology providers. Be like, take note, make CIO's life easy. And I mean, this may sound like a silly or oversimplified question, but people are not mind readers. Is it fair to say that to somebody from a technology team that if they're not sure how they can de-risk and make it easier for you, they should just ask?
Yeah, I think people are very good at telling you what help they need. So don't shy away from that. Just ask the question, how can I make this easier for you? What can I do? What can I add that will reduce the risk for you, increase your confidence in the success of this implementation? What guardrails I can introduce for you to make this a much less stressful journey? And I'm sure all my colleagues will react very well to those types of questions.
Irene, I want to be a bit futuristic now and just say, you've seen sort of technology evolve. You see it every day. You sometimes have announcements that over sort of a course of a day or so can make you pivot on a strategy. What are some of the trends you think that sort of business leaders should be prepared for from a technology perspective? And what action should they be taking in the short term to prepare for?
Yeah, so interesting topic. How do you prepare for the unknown? I would start with reflecting on what is it that we do know. I was lucky enough to spend some time at the OpenAI head office about a month and a half ago, meeting with the CEO of OpenAI, Brad Lighthouse. And we had some interesting conversations. And this was actually one of the questions that I asked him. And I said, Brad, how do you see the workplace evolving? What is going to change? And what he has shared is that as we look at AI, right now we're in the equivalent of the 1970s of computing. So the infrastructure is somewhat there. We're missing data. We're missing connectivity between platforms. We're very much in the basic phase, but it's going to evolve very quickly. And where we are today, if you think about it, it's something called intelligence in the sky. And you're going to see a shift between intelligence in the sky to a critical thinker. In other words, right now I have a question. I send a question out into the universe. The universe of AI gives me back an answer. So there is intelligence in the sky. What's coming out shortly, and to a large extent, Microsoft already made some of these announcements at Ignite, and there will be more coming. AI is going to shift from intelligence in the sky to your colleague, a very smart PhD level colleague that is going to sit next to you and collaborate with you and jointly work with you across platforms on your device. So for instance, you can sit down and I need to create a document. And instead of me asking AI to fill out sections, AI will say, I think you could really benefit from an FAQ session here. Do you want me to fill that out for you? Sure. Oh, I think you have made a mistake here. Maybe we need to adjust this part. Oh, your client might ask you these types of questions. Do you want to make sure that you already have the answers in the document? So that's one example. Another example is how will you develop, write code, write programs? And again, some of this exists already. Some of this I've seen in preview, but you're going to be working on code jointly with AI. A lot of it, one is going to be low code, no code, but the elements where there is code, AI will help you. Oh, I think you have made a mistake here. There is a bug. Do you want me to fix that for you? Oh, do you want me also to add this function because that will help you in the rest of your. And so it's going to be a lot more collaborative. So some of the things we need to think through is our workforce is going to change from a lens of our workforce will expand from just people to people and autonomous agents, and figuring out how do we work together to make each individual more productive and give them the skills to be able to effectively work with these agents.
That's extremely interesting, Irene. You could see early iterations of this just by what some of these tools are able to do. But to your point, they're not quite omnipresent. You have to do use a tool for something, use the tool for something else, piece it together, and you're going to appreciate how sort of that consolidation can make life truly much easier. So if I am a leader of an organization and knowing that this is coming, would it be fair to say that the best thing I can do with my team in the short term is to start experimenting, get the team used to using these tools so that the concepts are not unfamiliar?
I'd say try to use it in all aspects of your life as individuals. So absolutely at work, if you can give access to your people to AI, that is going to be tremendously helpful, even if they're just learning how to use it in everyday. For instance, one of the things I dislike doing is taking meeting minutes. I never have to do that again because I now use AI for it. Or when you need to write content and you need to prepare maybe for a podcast, maybe you have a set of questions, maybe you need to figure out how to answer some of these. Normally, I would sit and look at it for a long time and think through, how do I answer some of these? Well, now I don't have to start from a blank page. I can feed these questions in, get recommended responses, adjust them based on my experience, adjust them based on my knowledge, amend them with my stories. But the core, the first draft is ready for me. and that's not something that I need to spend time on. Now, I'm not saying that's how I prepared for this podcast. However, it's open to interpretation. So I think you really need to look at how do you build AI into every little step of your day. I will tell you, at home, my kids use AI to learn. And so we didn't have a babysitter one day, and we sat down with the ChatGPT. And in fact, I have 2 boys, and they asked so many questions that we ran out of the allowed number of questions on the platform, and we were banned for the rest of the day. But you would be amazed at what types, why is the sun shining? Why is the sky blue? Is daddy smart? Like, you get all sorts of questions. Obviously, some of them AI can answer, some of them AI can't answer, but you just open up the world to them. Now, it has to be supervised. You don't want to leave them alone with this technology, but it just gives them so much freedom to ask all the questions that they're curious about and get very good quality answers.
Well, and I think as an attribute to our education system, what a great way, Irene, to introduce that early and get that naturally sort of almost like a natural instinct for a lot of our youth to say, hey, if you get used to this now, then it can become truly that colleague as you go on, because you were already doing this as a kid. And I mean, I can tell you with sort of kids that were born in the age of smartphones, they use smartphones with ease that sort of anyone of their elders would not ever reach, because they just instinctively knew how to do it.
Absolutely.
So, Irene, I will move to a part of our podcast that I like, that we call the rapid fire questions. So for this part of the podcast, it's straightforward. We're actually just looking sort of first word that comes top of mind, like nothing terribly elaborate. It's supposed to be fun and just without too much overthinking. And then if you want to elaborate on any of them, happy to. But I'll start with the first one, which is, what is your favorite word or phrase?
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
You're speaking like a true Canadian with hockey references, man.
It is a good one, though, and I think it speaks to some of the themes we covered earlier today, especially as it pertains to women. Don't be afraid to take that shot. You definitely won't get that role if you don't apply for it in the first place. So what's the worst that can happen?
The worst that will happen is you're right back where you started, so you wouldn't have had the opportunity anyway. What word or phrase do you hate, if any?
I don't know if it's a phrase, but I guess it is a phrase that I've heard many times throughout my life, and it basically goes something like this: you can't have it all. And this is something that I heard in the context of being a woman. And what it implied is you can't have a family and a career. You have to pick one. You're either a career woman or you're a family woman. And I just fundamentally disagree with that. And I find it infuriating because it limits, it's a way of just limiting women right from the beginning in terms of what they can and can't do. I have a wonderful family and a career that I love, and I don't believe that you ever have to pick one. There are definitely trade-offs. So, in fact, when I travel, I can't be with my kids that evening, and that's a trade-off, but I can still come back and we have a great time together and a sweet and loving family. So you have to make accommodations, but I think you can definitely have it all.
And I think that's great advice, Irene, because to your point, there's trade-offs, but that doesn't mean you can't have it all. It's just you have to be pragmatic about it. But you don't have to give up on your dreams just because you have to be one or the other. What word do you have a hard time pronouncing, if any?
It all depends on how many hours of sleep I've had. Let me put it this way. The smaller the number of hours of sleep, the more words fall in that category. But I would probably go with unfathomable. I think I got it right this time.
You did. So you must have gotten sleep pretty well last night. And I always make the joke here, Irene, as an immigrant, there were always sort of certain words that I had a hard time pronouncing, sort of coming to Canada. And I remember the word colonel, I used to say colonel, and people were like,
Yeah,
okay,
I've done that too.
amongst many others. So, now they seem like trivial. And it's like, you're like, how are you supposed to know? Or first time I came to Toronto, I'm like, Queen's Quay. People are like, oh, that's so funny. Wait, who says that? And you're like, how is one supposed to know? Um, what is your favorite word or phrase in another language?
La bella vita. And it's not a language that I speak, but I really like what the phrase represents. And ultimately it calls to enjoying life and really awakening your senses to every moment and making the most of every moment that you have. And it's just something that I fundamentally believe in.
Yeah, and bella meaning beautiful and vita meaning life in Italian.
Mhm.
Probably you could probably draw similar derivatives for all the other languages, so that plays nicely. And I'm continuing down my rapid fire questions, so don't mind me. How many languages do you speak?
3.
Excellent. Should I ask which language they are?
Sure. Obviously English. I also speak Russian and Hebrew, and then there are a few that I used to speak that I regret forgetting. So I'm no longer efficient in them, but I probably need to pick them up again.
Well, it's hard. It's hard being in the business of languages. It is hard to stay on top of them.
I am
And
doing my Spanish though, so that's work in progress right now.
and we are at Alexa Transit. We're proud of you for that effort. And what's one word to describe yourself by?
Curious.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I suppose it's a skill and attribute that is critical to the job. So that does not surprise me. Well, Irene, I really appreciate your time today. It's been fascinating having you on this podcast, and I know that for a lot of our team listening to it as they put it together, and certainly to our audience once it's published, there'll be a lot of note taking, being like, we have to take some of this notes. It's I know how busy you are, and always appreciate sort of the time to share this with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Just some great questions, and really enjoyed talking to you, Gary. So thank you.